from Sweden, Germany, France and Spain, as well as across the UK. And we took this bridge for two main reasons. One, because as scientists, we have been trying to warn the world of what's coming for 30 years and we have been ignored. We haven't been invited by the media to speak about these issues until we started putting our bodies on the line and getting arrested. So we chose to cause disruption and get arrested in order to get our voices heard. But there's a second very important reason why we took our action as scientists, not as citizens, but as scientists. And that's because over 15,000 scientists have declared that we are in a planetary emergency, but very few scientists are acting as if it's an emergency. And that sends a very dangerous message, that perhaps it can't be as bad as they say if they are not taking emergency action. Personally, I worry that there are people out there who subconsciously think that if things were as bad as we say, the scientists would be out on the street rebelling. And so we are. When we were released from custody on Saturday, we were released under bail conditions that barred us from entering the centre of Glasgow. And this is wrong. At a time of global crisis, when the world is gathering in Glasgow to hammer out solutions, scientists should not be silenced. But when we were looking over our bail conditions and the exclusion zone that we were prevented from entering, we noticed that it did not include the south end of the bridge we took. So we were obliged to come back. So we have a number of scientists gathered to speak to you today. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to bust some of the myths, call out some of the bullshit we hear coming from inside the COP. Then some of our other scientists will tell us about their personal journeys, why they are here, and then we're going to have an open mic. If any of you would like to say something about this planetary crisis we face, come and speak to someone in a white coat and we'll get you a slot afterwards. So we might just need a couple of minutes to get ourselves sorted and we'll be right back. Thank you.
I'm John Johnson, and I'm a delegate here. I'm a delegate here for the COP conference. I'm here to inform you all that you're doing it all wrong. Okay? Now we have all of the answers, and we can guarantee that there will be no further problems in regards to the climate crisis. Okay? So I'm going to start with our four-part. We've got a four-part plan. Okay, a four-part plan. That's four. 1, 2, 3, and 4-part plan to resolve all of the inverted commas issues that we have with the inverted commas climate crisis. Now, I would like to begin with number 1. Firstly, we're going to plant 1 trillion trees. How does that sound?
Too late! Too late!
That would work, right?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Planting trees are important. We all know trees are important. Our natural ecosystems absorb 1/4 of all our emissions, and we simply cannot get out of this climate crisis without conserving and restoring nature. And so you will hear people like Mr. Johnson saying that all we need to do is plant some trees. And tree planting's a hugely popular solution. It's cheap, it's easy, you get a nice photo up with the politician and his spade. You can even get the community out to help you and you have a nice day out. And of course, trees are good. Trees are fantastic. They store carbon. They provide habitat for wildlife. They help reduce flooding. And of course, we love them. They give us amenity value. Trees make us happy. But while the right tree in the right place does all of those things, the wrong tree in the wrong place can be a disaster. Governments and other organizations around the world have made mass tree planting commitments in response to the climate crisis, but these commitments almost all involve the planting of industrial monocultures of non-native species. Anyone that has traveled around Scotland or Wales or the uplands of England knows that these industrial plantations of spruce are deserts for wildlife. They're dark and sterile, nothing lives there. You will see projections, scientific papers published talking about the potential of tree planting to solve the climate crisis. Unfortunately, the way these calculations are made is that they take a map of the earth, they find everywhere that's not farming or cities and that could possibly support trees, and they say all these areas could be planted. Unfortunately, most of those areas are existing biodiverse habitats, places like grasslands and fens and peat bogs and moors. And if you plant trees on a grassland, you're not creating a forest, you're destroying a grassland. So this could be, if we're not careful in the way tree planting is done, it could be a disaster for biodiversity. Of course, it would be ridiculous to suggest that places like the Serengeti or the Masai Mara are planted under plantations of eucalyptus, but this is the sort of thing that will be proposed as an emergency climate action. Trees also take a long time to grow. They take a long time to absorb carbon. But if we're planting a tree now that's going to be mature in 50 years, the world is going to be very different in 50 years. And the conditions for that tree to survive might not grow. We're seeing that already with mass forest fires all around the world. There are projects, there are tree plantations that have been, established as carbon sequestration projects that have already been burnt in forest fires. But the main thing is, well, two main things. Tree planting is a distraction from the much, much more important task of protecting the trees that we already have. Trees, you cannot create a forest. You can plant trees, but you cannot create a forest. Right now, we have lots of policy saying we should plant more trees, and yet we're letting the Amazon and the Congo Basin be cut down. This is nonsensical. Protecting the trees we have is much more important. And then finally, of course, the reason why politicians are so keen to sell tree planting is that it gives the impression that they are doing something while avoiding doing the only thing we really have to do, which is stop burning fossil fuels. So I'm not saying trees are not important. Trees are fantastic, and we must increase forest cover. We should not do so through tree planting, we should do so through natural regeneration, and this is not an alternative to stopping burning fossil fuels. We need to do both. Thank you. So take that, Mr. Johnson.
Right, well, with all due respect, I don't know about all of you, but I've had enough of listening to the experts. No? Oh. Right, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It does not matter, because we have a 4-point plan. And even if my tree plan is no good to all of you lot, I've got another idea. And that is around carbon capture technology and other innovations which will solve everything. Okay? What do you think of that?
Science fiction.
What?
Greenwash.
Let's go talk to the experts about that. I've left my notes at home.
So, this one's a particularly dangerous one. As you can probably hear from my accent, I'm from Australia. My country's delegation has come here with the message, sponsored by Santos, right? Santos is one of our biggest mining and carbon exporters in Australia. They have come with the message that carbon capture and storage is an integral part, in fact, one of the only strategies we have in combating this problem. Carbon capture and storage is not capable of meeting its own goals. Carbon capture and storage has missed every single one of its targets. In the year 2000, so what was that, COP5 or 6? We were promised by the political classes by 2020, we would be capturing 4,900 megatons of CO2 per year. 4,900 billion tons of CO2 would be being captured per year. Last year, we barely had 10 megatons. That's 0.2% of what was promised. This doesn't even show up on the graph, so you don't need to be a scientist to read this graph. I've brought it along. The blue line, or the purple line, is the emissions of CO2 since the year 1959. And by the way, the oil companies have known about this crisis since 1956. The CO2 emissions do not lie. We've heard a bunch of lies in this COP process, but that graph does not lie. And what the red line represents is the actual amount of carbon being captured. Now, by the way, carbon dioxide is the only one of the greenhouse gases that we know how to capture and in any form, in any scalable form. The red line, as you can see, it doesn't even register a difference on that graph. So, worse still, this isn't even 0.3% of yearly emissions of CO2. Yearly emissions of CO2 are around 36 to 38,000 megatons. In 2000, we were promised 100 active CCS projects, carbon capture and storage projects, operating by 2020. We had 6%. These projects are unbelievably expensive. And who pays? The fossil fuel companies are privatizing these profits while the social cost of these projects is enormous. They've received enormous compensation and have consistently underperformed or failed in their operations. One plant in Australia captured just 1.8% of its target across 5 years. This was run by the energy giant Chevron, and they received $60 million Australian dollars in compensation for that project. Canada spent over $1 billion Canadian dollars on a plant which averaged less than 60% of its target. Several expensive plants have been closed due to performance issues, technology issues, and reliability issues. And yet new projects being suggested by people, my government and John Johnson here, are on the way. They're diverting taxpayer funds away from more effective projects such as clean energy, green infrastructure, insulation projects, clean transport projects, and towards these tax-dodging, polluting companies who promote other failed tech solutions such as hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and CCUS. I guess the final point I would like to make is we've got a bathtub, right? And the bathtub is overflowing. The bathtub representing our climate and a habitable planet. That bathtub will keep overflowing unless we turn the tap off. The tap being continued carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. You don't think of a plan of how you're going to mop up the water that's flowing onto the floor until you turn that tap off. That's the first thing you do. What carbon capture and storage is talking about doing is continuing this paradigm of emissions, and that we can somehow fix the problem later with negative emissions technologies like that. It is not going to work. It is not scalable. It is not contributing to a social just transition. It's a continuation of the exact type of failures that COP has delivered for 26 years and will keep doing. That's my professional scientific opinion, is that this is a very dangerous idea. I'm not saying it's not going to form some part of the solution, but it alone is no silver bullet, and there's a very good reason that the fossil fuel companies are here promoting that technology. I want to leave you with that. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Very, very well put. Very well put. No, of course. But let's stop for a moment. All right, let's just stop for a moment and think about the money. Okay? We need to think about our economy. With our economic growth, if we just, maybe just forget about some of this stuff a little bit and focus on the money, I think we can fix all of these problems with all of the cash that we're going to earn, right? No, it will be fine. Of course, right? I'm sure that this scientist here could back me up. Is that right? Lots of cash, that'll fix it. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't that be nice? So, I think one thing that we consider is how much has the quality of life in Britain improved in the last 50 years? Most studies suggest that it's got worse for most people. People are less happy, less wealthy. Well, in that time, our economy has grown by a factor of 14. Yes. People should be 14 times better off, right? But growth isn't doing that for people, and it never will. In fact, it's going to do the opposite. So what I have here on this poster, thank you, Charlie. That at the top there is a graph of different possible pathways that we could take socially, economically, politically. And on the y-axis is the carbon emissions that come from those different policies. So what I'm going to talk to you briefly about is what does the Ipcc do, what does it model, and what does it show us about how to approach the future, and what that will show us, I think, is the discrepancy between what the science says is necessary and what the politicians are actually doing. Now, this top line here, this is one possible pathway that humans could choose to take. That's pretty much the trajectory that we are on. That means rapidly rising carbon emissions, it means deregulation, it means low investment in green technologies, and it means an infatuation with perpetual economic growth, exponential growth, and we're all used to what exponentials look like in the times of COVID. They tend to work out pretty badly. In fact, the only thing which grows exponentially is a cancer. And that's a good analogy for what economic growth is doing to this planet. It is destroying the host. And yet that is never talked about on the main political stage. The people who are meant to be making these decisions to protect life will not talk about this fundamental reality. We live on one planet. It is finite. You cannot keep exploiting it like this. It will collapse. And what this possible future entails is 4 to 6 degrees of heating. That's what the consequences are to the physical climate model, to the physical climate system. And what that means is that half the world will very likely become uninhabitable to most humans. So you're going to have a movement of billions of people having to flee their homes, to flee their countries, or to die. It means that many low-lying island nations will be lost to rising seas, and that is consistent with the definition of genocide. It means that there will be perpetual crisis, that food networks face collapse. All you need, 75% roughly of the global crops are produced in about 25% of the cropland. So if you're destabilizing the weather conditions of the planet, if you've got the Gulf Stream is rapidly shifting in where it is because the polar ice is melting, and so you haven't got this ice cube at the top of the planet anymore that's cooling down the air. You get disturbances to the air currents, which mean that you get trapped hot and cold weather where it shouldn't exist. I'd love to blame that for the weather here today in Glasgow, but I think it's just Glasgow. But what we're facing, that means, is that a confluence of exponential growth economically leads to exponential growth in the number of crises that we face. So if we don't shut down this paradigm, we will fail. Now, there are other options. And this links in very closely to what Kyle was just saying about carbon capture and storage, because hidden in some of these models, here we can take this projection here in the orange line, if you can see that. We'll have more of these posters up around the city, I'm sure. This orange line here shows something like a consistent trajectory to what humans have been following, if you think about it quite optimistically. But what's hidden in this pathway here is, you see, actually it does bend down. It looks like the emissions end up going down. The only way you can make that happen is by invoking large-scale deployment of carbon capture and storage technology, which doesn't exist. So the entirety of our future is being gambled on a faith that a piece of technology that will emerge to solve our problems. But there is no indication that it is going to do so, and it is a distraction from doing the hard work of systemic transformation which is necessary to confront this crisis and to save potentially billions of lives. So the final model I'll just point to here, they do a lot of modeling, it's hard to summarize in 5 minutes, but the final models I'll point to here are these lowest trajectories, because what they represent are something of a genuine climate revolution. What those models do is, instead of focusing on perpetual economic growth, they focus on redistribution of the wealth that already exists. They focus on climate justice and equity as being fundamental to climate progress. And that means listening to the voices of the disenfranchised and the disempowered, which is one of the things that we are here to do. The people whose lives are being lost today, the people who are forced from their homes and their nations today, are not given platform to speak. And so we invisibilize them. We don't hear their voices, and that's one thing that we have to do, because this is objectively true. The safest way out of this crisis is to change how we approach it. So I'll basically finish by saying I think that we a couple of months ago we leaked the third working group report of the Ipcc. And we did that because many people don't recognize this, but those reports that you read that come out from the Ipcc, they're doctored. They're not the original reports. What happens is the scientists create a report that says this is what is the cause of a crisis, this is what we need to do about it, and then representatives from different governments go through that report line by line, and they remove or edit anything that they can't agree on. Shame. Shame, absolutely. And it endangers us all. So we leaked that report to show what it says in the words of the scientists, in the words of what is true. And we will see in March, when it is published officially, how much governments have chosen to occlude and to obscure from the public so that they can continue a destructive political and economic system that benefits only a tiny number. We're here to call that out.
It's all Project Fear. It's all Project Fear. There's nothing to worry about. Look, us governments, we have never, ever failed you in all of our years of governance. No, just quiet down, okay? Quiet down. We've got it in hand, okay? We're already doing everything that we could possibly... No, that's a bad idea. No, let's not do that. Look, we've made this lovely COP26 conference. We brought the sun. No, we didn't do that. But it's all wonderful, and I can promise you that. And if you just continue to... Oh, hush you over there. Look, it's going to be fine. I can promise you. Look, maybe you could help me out here. I'm sure that you'll be on my side, sir.
Thanks, everyone. The other day, Scientists Rebellion made history. We were the first mass arrest of scientists over the climate crisis ever. It shouldn't have taken this long. We should have been on the streets 30, 40 years ago. And the reason that we took direct action is we are making no demands of COP. COP has failed 25 times and it's about to be the 26th. The governments have failed us. At best, they have failed us for the same amount of time. So what we're doing is we are calling on the people to go into civil resistance. We need people to non-violently break the law. The system is killing us, and we have to show that we understand that, we have to act like that. And the only way to do this is to break the law peacefully, as we did, as 21 of us were arrested the other day. It's often said that there's government inaction over the climate crisis. That's not true. They do plenty of action, but what they're doing is they are not our allies. They are actively funding the fossil fuel industry every year, globally in trillions of dollars a year. In the UK, it's about £10 billion every year is given in free money to the people who are killing us. Our money is being given to those who are literally killing us by the government. They are not on our side, and that's why we have it's not just that we have it's moral that we are allowed to rebel, it's that we have a duty. If the government is committing treason, and when it is murdering its own citizens for political gain, that is treason. There is nothing short of that. They are doing it, and they know that they're doing it. Some of them are so stupid they don't understand, but that's not an excuse. And half of them do know what they're doing, and they're just psychopathic. And we have to call that out. We only get one chance to avoid extinction, right? There's not going to be a do-over. We are currently failing miserably. Emissions are still rising, and it's COP26, right? If collapse happens, that's it. Once we're dead, once it's extinction, it's us dead forever. We can't fuck this up. We have to do everything possible. And that means acting as if your child will starve to death from this. It means acting as if this is really going to happen. And that's incredibly difficult, right? The science is terrifying and complex and confusing, but at its core, it's very simple. Either we drastically alter society, and that means removing the people currently in power and putting ourselves in power through citizens' assemblies. Unless we do that, we're all going to go down. And we have to do it now. I think I'll leave it there.
Maybe you're right.
Okay, thank you so much. So we had Dr. Charlie Garner, a conservation who works in conservational science.
Hold the mic closer.
Sorry?
Hold the mic closer.
Okay, sorry. So we had Dr. Charlie Garner, who works in conservation science. Dr. Tim Hewlett, astrophysicist. Kyle Tropper, an environmental scientist. And Mike Lynch-White, who is a physicist. And now we are going to hear from Mila Top, who is going to talk about her personal reasons for being here and about an ecosite at Mauritius Islands. She's a zoology student. Thank you, Mila.
Hi, I just want to maybe highlight why I stood with Scientists Rebellion on the bridge, and it was mainly to represent the people of Mauritius and the scientists of Mauritius, who don't really have much of a voice in the global playing field, I guess. Last year there was a huge oil spill on the south of the island near a marine, a protected marine area. The bulk carrier was the MV Wakasho, a Japanese oil bulk carrier, and it crashed into the coral reef, and for 2 weeks the Mauritian government and the Japanese government failed to take any immediate action. As a result, the oil began to leak into the ocean, and it took another week for there to be any answers. It was killing the mangroves and destroying sort of the ecosystem around that area. The Mauritian people took it upon themselves to make sort of floats that absorb the oil. They all went out and got their hair cut, used dried sugar cane. So it was a kind of mobilization of the population trying to clean up the oil spill, where the Mauritian government just stood back and did nothing, and the Japanese government didn't say anything about their part played in this disaster. And they wouldn't let their own scientists near the actual crash. the oil spill crash. Those scientists know the ecology more than anyone. So when they were demanding why they couldn't get near to do an environmental assessment, they were just silenced or put in prison. The Japanese government decided to send their own scientists, obviously, and those scientists said that all the oil was cleared and there was no damage done, which was just lies, because Greenpeace were invited, lots of international scientists were invited who had expertise in oil spill disasters. They weren't allowed near the site either to do any environmental assessment. So it's been a year on and there's still no accountability. There's still no, the Mercian people haven't had any answers about what the extent of the environmental damage is. There's been the deaths of whales and dolphins around that area. There's no answers about what caused their deaths. There's no answers about who's responsible. And so it's all very much a big cover-up. When the Mauritians got angry about it and they all went out and protest, it was like the biggest protest in the island's history to demand answers. A lot of them were just shut down, arrested. The main scientists who were involved in the inquiry have been silenced, and now there's just nothing's being done about it. So I wanted to bring some light to that again, to bring some media attention to that again, so that the Mercian people can start getting mobilized again to demand answers, because the damage that this oil spill has caused, the oil that's used is from BP. BP provided the oil. They were experimenting with this oil. It's a new crude oil which is extremely toxic. BP, once again, don't have anything to say about that, but they are liable as well as the Mauritian government, the British government, the Japanese government, the Japanese fishing trade are all guilty for this environmental disaster. The fishing industry is suffering. Small villages are suffering on the island because they can't, make a living, because it's damaged that area completely. The mangroves are damaged. Mangroves are really essential for carbon capture and the ecosystem. And there's a unique coral that are 1,000 years old that they specifically had made this marine protected area to keep these corals alive. So everything's going to be affected. And as you know, oil spills, they don't go away. The damage continues for years. And there's just, there's nothing being done about this. So that motivated me to stand with Scientist Rebellion and bring some light to that issue. And I hope that, if you want to know more about it, it's hashtag Wakasho oil spill. Ocean Rebellion have got lots of information on that. And I hope that the Mercian people will be able to start, going out and protesting again and finding answers, because the damage that this oil is going to continue to do, and the fact that these governments get away with literally murder of people and planet, it has to stop. So that's why I took part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mila. So now we have Javier de la Casa, a biologist. He has a message for the scientific community.
Hi, I am Javier de la Casa. I am an early career researcher. I just started my PhD in global change ecology. I was going to do another talk for today, but this morning I felt like I have to say something else, say something to the scientific community. I get nervous with these speeches. That's maybe why I became a scientist. But actually I became a scientist because I thought that the science and universities were the lanterns of hope. I really believe that. I believe that science was meant to be listened, and I believe that universities were the epicenter from change. Well, science and university are just words, and words may not change with time, but science and universities had. They have changed, and they are now part of this headless monster, what we call system. But I think there is still hope in science. Science has been domesticated by the capital, but still has a powerful revolutionary edge. Universities are quiet and accomplished, but history has proven their intrinsic power for change. And now I have a message for also early career researchers as me. Wait a second. It's our time and our duty to change science and universities. We need an academic revolution. Science is made to profit people, not journals. Science is made to shape the solutions for our problems, not at the incomes for the markets. Universities has to go beyond knowledge and facilitate a literate action. We have to stop believing that in companies taking lead on climate action because they are only focused in market profits. Universities have to fight for human profit. It's our time to change it all. We cannot embrace the current scenario of academia and universities. How dare we? We have to start gathering together in universities to shape the science and the universities needed to solve this planetary crisis. We need a new era of light and equity. We have to address seriously the lack of diversity and the geographical bias in scientific production and in university chairs. Senior researchers, please. You might feel powerless, but you are not. Don't be afraid of us. People, please facilitate the change and be part of it. Another world is possible, but if we fight for it. Thank you. And now I will pass the mic to Elena González Egea. She is going to talk about her personal experience, also about billionaires going to the space.
Hi, sorry, I need to find my speech that was written here. I wrote it. Yeah, just one moment. Okay, so my name is Elena. I'm an astrophysicist, and I just submitted my PhD about a month ago. So I find it incredible how little I knew about the implications of the climate crisis until 2 years ago, when I really found out. How very little I learned about it while doing my degree in physics, how very little it's on everyday news or in academic debates, at least in the circles that at least in the astrophysics debate. Ever since I opened my eyes to the climate catastrophe we are facing, I feel somewhat conflicted about my career and about what to do with my life. I feel like I still like what I do sometimes, that I still feel touched and amazed by space and by new knowledge. But I feel all the work and effort I have put in my PhDs for nothing. I subscribe what Tim Hewlett said in a talk he gave in the National Astronomical Meeting here in the UK, that he was having some problems feeling motivated to do research in astronomy when you feel your work won't survive you. And as we have been saying, that there are very good reasons to feel that way. So the climate crisis we are facing is likely going to end civilization as we know it. It might even cause the human extinction if we don't act now. When I first realized this, I thought that I should have studied something else, something more related to climate. But then I saw that climate scientists are being ignored and that their work is not respected by governments or big companies. So governments that have been ignoring the warnings of the scientific community for decades. Companies that have done massive misinformation and manipulation campaigns to lie about their impact on climate and on the biodiversity loss. Yesterday I was talking with my friend Jo, who is also an astronomer, about how she also feels conflicted at her job of building a new telescope in the face of an imminent climate and biodiversity collapse. And about how people normally ask her, and myself too, things like, what do you think of Jeff Bezos going to space? Is that really cool, right? Yeah, Jeff Bezos, who was here at COP26, was invited.
To just sit back and really listen and take everything that I think I take a lot of this stuff for granted now. It's like, oh yeah, it's so dreadful, isn't it? But without actually really sitting down and reading up on what is really going on here. And so for me, I mean, I've got my own cross to bear by doing this project, that any miles that you travel, there is going to be some kind of carbon footprint. I do most of it on this folding bike, but you know, there are trains to be taken, there are ferries to ride, and sailboats to hitchhike on, and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, that's just my project in brief, and I thought I'd just I'll play a Scottish tune for you guys as we're up in Glasgow. I hope you enjoy it. Si lo pones algo como... Sí, it's just that, yeah, if we do it like that, maybe.
You twist round a bit, then you twist round a bit.
Was a flower boy, but a soldier I'm now. I courted wee lovely Molly as I followed the plough. I courted wee lovely Molly at the age of 16, but now I must leave her for to serve James my king. Oh, Molly, lovely Molly, I delight in your charms, and there's many's the long night you have lain in my arms. But if ever I return again, it will be in the spring, where the mavis and the turtle dove and the nightingale sing. You can go to the fair. You can go to church on Sunday and meet your new love there. But if anybody loves you half as much as I do, then I won't stop your marriage. So farewell, no, I won't stop your marriage. So farewell.
She's an PhD student in arts and history. And she's going to talk about her project called 2020 The Walk. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.